Here in part two, Cliff will be going into taxation. Now, why should you care? Odds are it's something that affects you, or you think it affects you. And yes, there's such a thing as a taxpayer, and there's also a non-taxpayer. This is the first part in many conversations where Cliff will be going into a deep dive and simplifying and clarifying what most people think is a muggy, convoluted, complex topic that they just don't have a hope of understanding. But with Cliff's deep knowledge on the subject, he does a really good job at breaking it down into simple, straightforward, and understandable terms. So, are you ready to find out if you're a non-taxpayer? Start down that journey. We hope you get value from this conversation.
Yeah. The next emotionally catastrophic event that I went through was, it was probably 10 years after it was in the late 80s, 1988, so it was 10 years after I did the firewalk thing. And I had discovered a number of things about tax law. And I recognized that I wasn't a person made liable to file a return or anything. So I had quit filing returns. The last federal tax return I filed was in 1975. And the IRS contacted me in 1987, I'm going to say, asking me about it, and I didn't understand how to read legal letters. And it was instead of being threat, question, it was that's the way I interpreted it, was threat, and then a question. And it wasn't, it was question, and then a what to do about it. If you're not part of the first two, this is what you have to do about it. But it wasn't, it's not written in a clear, concise way that would explain that to anybody that didn't understand what they were talking about. So I wrote back to them and explained what I thought, and they never answered any of my questions. They just said, "You're wrong." Okay, why am I wrong? Well, because we think you're wrong. That's not a reason in law, you know. If there is a taxing act that applies to me, show me which one it is and that stuff, and then we'll deal with it from there. That just didn't happen. And then I made the mistake of calling. There was an agent that come out to my house. He came to my house 4 or 5 times. And, since then I know that that's an absolute no-no. He didn't have authority to come out. And some of the things that he was demanding of me, he didn't have any authority to demand any of that kind of stuff. And I called him an idiot. I might use some, other language involved here, but I called him an idiot.
Maybe.
Yeah, and of course he didn't like that, and he purposely tried to screw me over, and he got it done. And I lost all of my property, everything that I had gained in the 10 years that since I had got over my depression. I had a number of real properties that I owned and was in the process of trying to buy more. And they took everything that I had, and I never was accused of anything. I never went to court. I never did anything. And I knew intuitively that, wait a minute, that can't happen, not in this country, you know.
You have to have due process.
Right. You got to have due process. And here I am, 31 years later, still trying to get due process done. And I think I'm closer now than what I've ever been. But, you know, you don't know until the courts agree with you.
Right. That's one of the things I've noticed with some people when it comes to not even just the government or law, but pretty much anything in life where if it's a bit like training a dog, where if they try a few things and they get whacked each time, they'll just stop doing the thing. But instead of going, okay, how can I actually find a solution here? Is there a solution? Am I wrong in the process, or am I wrong in the outcome I'm seeking? You know, am I just pissing into the wind here, or am I just going about this the wrong way?
Right.
You know, it's like Jim Rohn had said, a person's personal philosophy is the set of the sail. And some people just don't adjust their sails. They then said, oh, I did this thing 3 times. It didn't work. I got whacked for it. Therefore, I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that has happened over the years is I kept on focusing. I kept on focusing on when it works, why does it work? I mean, how do you read these tax codes, and how do you make the same sense out of them that the court would make sense out of them? And over the years, I've learned that there's a very simple system that underlies all of these things. And once you understand the system and you question each step in the system to get an answer, you can't possibly be wrong. All you have to do is just follow this system. And the system is that every taxing act of Congress is written.
Yeah.
You know,
Makes
and
sense.
it has a name and it has a public law identification number to it. And once you start there, now you're looking at the written law, and it tells you what's being taxed and that sort of thing. And usually the law is very short in paragraphs. I mean, a page or so is good enough. Is what most tax laws are based on, is just a certain page or so, because then it goes to the president and he signs it into law, and then he assigns it to the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of the Treasury promulgates it into law by saying that this part number of the Code of Federal Regulations applies to this particular taxing act. And within that part number are all of the United States Code sections number which are approved for that act.
Okay.
And then from there, it goes to who the person made liable to file the return is. And it gives the description of this person. So if you follow through on that, there are in Title 26 United States Code, titled Internal Revenue, there are 9,300 sections in that volume. And of those 9,300 sections, there's no taxing act where all 9,300 apply.
Okay.
So that's where you end up with confusion because people don't understand that you have to go to the regulations before you go to the code, because the code is not the law. The code is evidence that there is an underlying law,
Hmm.
but you have to get to the underlying law first.
Right. Well, that's one of the things a lot of people do, and it's really fascinating because even people who are involved in this stuff of trying to understand the system, I see them doing the same exact things that proponents, the people they see as their opponents, do, where they conflate not just terms, but laws or laws with codes or the wrong code to the wrong law, and during this whole back and forth. And I've had these discussions with people where I say, well, this says this, and it goes from here to here to here, and then they'll come in with something out of left field, and it's like, no, 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 that's not how it works. That does not apply to it. And I've had that with accountants, and I've had that with people who I thought were on my side,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll do the same thing where they'll then just say, no, you're wrong. Well, show me where I went wrong in the process. Well, you're just wrong. It's like, okay, well then you're not actually searching for a solution here. You're either complaining, or you're trying to manipulate me,
Mm-hmm.
or you're trying to manipulate me with your ignorance.
Right. Right. And there's a lawful way around all of that kind of stuff, or to get to the truth. Uh,
Because it's written down.
right. Right.
Right.
And if they're saying that there is a law that requires you, then in that statement they are the person required to produce the law.
Makes sense.
You know, or they take it upon themselves personally. One is that they're acting theoretically as a government agent. They're saying there is a law. Okay, if you're saying that there is a law and you're doing that because you are, a commissioner, an agent,
A clerk.
an officer, a clerk, yeah, whatever. If you're saying that from that capacity, then you have to show me the law. If you're not saying it from that capacity, then you're saying it personally.
Right.
And that is a trespass on my rights. And I charge $10,000 per trespass plus $2 a minute for every minute, 24 hours a day that this trespass continues until you stop trespassing.
Right.
And now what you're doing is you're putting that person on notice that if you're going to claim that you have authority, you need to show that authority now.
Because if you're not, then you are just acting under the color of law.
Right.
You're abusing your office.
Yeah, it's actually color of office. It's not color of law. Color of law says there is a law, that there is a specific law. Color of office means, yeah, I'm going to blow by this somehow and just flash my badge.
I'm going to assume authority of my office where
Right.
there is no authority there to
Right.
begin with.
Right. Yeah.
Or not that at authority at least.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So, and you can challenge them in two ways. You either use statutory law or the common law, which are two different solutions, possible solutions. And if you go in statutory law, then you have to charge them with fraud and extortion under color of office. Uh, it's not criminal fraud. It's a statutory claim, um, and it calls a court into play there. What is okay? This person's claiming this person's authority this person is claiming a certain authority, and then whenever they go into court, the first thing the court has to see is what's the law that they're claiming, because that's what the court is going to judge it on. Right. Is the actual law. And if they don't have one, then the court issues a cease and desist order to them. And if they go over and above that, if they try to say, no, I don't care what the court says, now they're in problems with the statutory law thing, and they could end up, being fined and put in prison and all kinds of stuff like that. But the purpose is to solve the problem, not to punish somebody.
Right. Right. Well, there are people who really love problems. There are people who really love solutions. And there are people who just love chaos. And I think a lot of the administrators that we have to deal with in private corporations and state and fed are people who want authority but no responsibility. And as much as the point of the process of solving these issues is to not punish someone, it's to find a solution. For people like that, the only way they're not going to abuse their authority is because they're afraid of responsibility.
Right.
Responsibility.
Right.
And some people just have to get fired.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but we had that experience when I was a youngster where trying to get my driver's license, we actually had to sue the sheriff's department. And it went all the way up to the secretary for the Department of Transportation for the state. And it was all because all the people going up to the secretary were saying something that was just completely not in line with the law.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, well, this is department policy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking to them in the language of law. And government employees, for the most part, don't care about the law. They care about what their boss tells them. And in this case, the secretary for the whole department, he just cared what his employees were saying to him.
Right.
And it was just the wildest thing. And the judgment came back from the court in a very short time. I think it was weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that clear cut and dry, where the ruling, I think, was maybe 2 or 3 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And most of that was who, what, when, where. And then a page and a half was the ruling.
Right.
And the judge said explicitly the defendant parties are acting unreasonably. It's just not they're confused or they were mistaken, or they're just being unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about it a few times where it's unfortunate that we didn't go back at some point and get someone fired or see if we could have, because that would have been a way to make some waves of where at least someone somewhere would have been put on notice of law is more important than administrative policy.
Right. Right. And that brings me back to a point that fraud and extortion under color of office is not a criminal offense. However, if a person that works for government is convicted by a court of fraud and extortion under color of office, they can no longer work for government ever again.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons for bringing that charge, is if somebody is arrogant and they're just not educated enough to understand what the limits to their authority are, they have to be taken out of the process.
Right.
Because the Peter Principle works in government. I mean, they will move up and up and up until they get to a point where they're not smart enough to move up anymore, and they can screw up everything below them.
I mean, going that way, you could become vice president.
There you go.
You just fail upwards.
Right.
It's amazing how that whole process works. It reminds me of Mel Gibson's The Patriot, where at the start he was arguing against war with King George, and he said, why should I be worried about one tyrant 2,000 miles away when there are 2,000 tyrants a mile away? Because a man's rights can be trampled on by a legislative body as quickly as by a king.
Right.
And there's so much that makes America unique, but at the same time, all of these problems really weren't new. What I've thought about a lot is that it's really no surprise that we've gotten to the point where we are. The surprise is that we didn't arrive here faster in worse fashion, where it's just the fact that America was possible in the first place,
Right.
where the founding fathers had everything predicated on law and history, where it's kind of, I discussed it with a friend recently, where if one has any sort of historical context, one can look at a situation and go, oh, this is where they were, here's where they are, that's their trajectory of where, I mean, we can point to a handful of things that all failed cultures had in common. And it's like, oh, well, this is where it's going. And there's a reset. And one of the things that always gets pointed to is an overburdened administrative state, where you don't just have a king who arbitrarily messes with groups or individuals. You have entire armies of administrative tyrants who believe that they're untouchable.
Well, history shows us that there are only 4 forms of government, and all governments that have ever existed fits into one of those 4 forms. And the thing that all the forms have in harmony with one another is that they all abhor the other, and they cannot exist except by themselves. So each one of them, there's anarchies, republics, democracies, and oligarchies.
Okay.
And each one of them has to, in order to survive, it has to kill off the other 3. Has to. And the 2 that are longest surviving out of that are republics and oligarchies. Anarchy is just a means to get to some other form of government, because it's just chaos.
Right.
Absolute chaos.
And people just don't function in that.
Right.
It's just not a
Right. Well, and
option.
people won't put up with it.
Right.
And then on the other end of it, the extreme other end of it, you have oligarchies, and of course, the people don't put up with it, and then they die because they don't put up with it. They get killed off. There's just that's always happened every time there's been a shift in governments from anarchies to republics to democracies to oligarchies. Whenever it hits oligarchy, millions of people get killed. And some of them are just starved to death, but they're still dead.
Right. The result is still the same, and what wasn't it Thomas Jefferson who said, those who beat their swords into plowshares will be ruled by those who did not.
Yeah, something like that. That would be something that he would have said.
And that just reminds me of, like, outside the UN, they have this giant sculpture of a revolver that's been twisted up into a knot, and it has some plaque on there about peace, and it's so sick, the idea that you get peace by giving up your weapons.
Yeah, right.
That you give up your means of defending yourself. Every, most people can recognize that the Japanese were some of the most sophisticated warriors of all time, and they were the most sophisticated warriors in their time.
Mm-hmm.
And they practiced barbaric warfare and mastered it, and Zen Buddhism. And they perfectly embodied the philosophy of, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea of you get peace by being weak, by not being a threat. I mean, it was Roosevelt who said, speak quietly and carry a large stick.
Right. Yeah, Teddy.
Yeah, the good one.
Yeah.
The good Roosevelt.
Right.
But it was this perverted notion of being weak is good, and being helpless is good, being uninformed is good. Wisdom, knowledge isn't power. Knowledge applied is power. And not being able, if someone doesn't even know what his rights are, how is he supposed to stick up for them?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't know how to stick up for them, you're just as screwed as if you don't have them.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things, having known a lot of extremist people in my lifetime, they're missing a point in the process. And the reason I say that is, like, Abe Lincoln had said, the country is governed by 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jurors box, and the munitions box. And they're made to be used in that order. And where people go wrong and off the rails is where they go straight to the 3rd box.
Right.
And not being racked by these emotionally catastrophic events, of knowing there is a solution. Some things may look the same because the weak man may have the outward appearance of the peaceful man.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it gets talked a lot about some of the top MMA fighters in the world. They're the ones who don't get involved in street fights.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who don't have bar brawls. They avoid those things like the plague.
Right.
For one, they're not being paid for it.
Right. That, and then there's some other things. They exude confidence, so they don't get into those brawls. I mean, you know whenever you've crossed the line with a guy that has a hard line.
Right. When you meet a guy who has ears that look like that look like Shrek,
Right.
You're like, you know what? Let's just not. How about I not talk
Right.
crap to this guy?
Right.
You know, and he's
missing 3 front teeth for a reason.
Right. His traps are so big he can turn and bite them.
Yeah, right.
It's just like, how about no? It's just that peace, that non-reactivity. It's such a big topic for me because I've been there and done that. I've been a highly emotionally reactive person. And one of the fascinating things to me, some people close to me in my life who think they're the most stoic, rational, logical people are actually some of the most emotional people I know. It's just the way they cope with it is by being hyper-rational.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll go off the rails rationally, just so they don't have to deal with the emotion they're incapable
Right.
of processing in that moment. And this concept of, especially when it comes to men need to show their emotions and, just be authentic and not be held back by societal norms.
Mm-hmm.
Really? You want men to emotionally act out? I mean, it just shows in the stats of women attempt to self-delete more than men, but men succeed more often because even towards themselves, men are more violent.
Mm-hmm.
The solution to part of the solution to men's mental health is not act out your emotions. We don't even teach children that. We teach them, okay, feel it. Don't punch your mom. You don't get to kick her just because you feel a certain way.
Right.
At least this is what we used to teach them. And then people are shocked when we have men who are. We went from children to juveniles to adults, and now we have the term young adults, where they're man babies because they're so emotionally reactive.
Right.
And instead of finding a solution of like, okay, I can feel this, I can process through it, I'll find a way. Feel it, it's not wrong, it's not bad. But just because you feel this way doesn't mean you get to lash out.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than feeling through the emotion, not judging it as bad or as wrong, finding a way to deal with it in a way that's healthy and productive instead of just lashing out, going straight to the third box. Even if there is an injustice or something that's unfair, being emotionally reactive, getting angry, might be a good catalyst for action, but operating out of that place is non-productive. And it then comes back to, if it's termed bad, wrong, or unhealthy, well, what is bad or wrong? Well, it's that which is unhealthy. What's unhealthy? That which is unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And that process just isn't sustainable of just being angry and pissed off instead of finding a solution. Because odds are you won't find a solution. You'll probably make it worse. I mean, just from interactions with family and loved ones.
Right.